Commander Hyunwoo stood on the observation deck of Sentinel-7, staring at the impossible sight before him. The alien ship hung in space like a massive crystal flower, its translucent petals rotating slowly around a glowing core. He had been a soldier for 20 years, fought in 3 wars, and survived the Mars colony riots. Nothing had prepared him for this moment. "Sir, they're transmitting again," Lieutenant Park said from behind him. Her voice trembled slightly. Everyone on the station was nervous. First contact with an alien species was something humanity had dreamed about for centuries. Now that it was happening, fear mixed with excitement in equal measure. Hyunwoo turned away from the window. "Put it through to my office, and get Dr. Jiwon up here immediately." Dr. Jiwon arrived within minutes, her tablet clutched against her chest. She was Earth's leading xenobiologist, though until today she had only studied theoretical alien life. Her expertise was about to be tested in ways she never imagined. "They want to talk," Hyunwoo said simply, gesturing to the communication console. "You're the expert. Tell me what we're dealing with." Jiwon sat down and pulled up the alien transmissions. The language was unlike anything in Earth's databases, but the patterns were clear. Mathematics, chemical formulas, images of peaceful gatherings. The aliens were trying to communicate friendship. "They're being very careful," Jiwon observed. "See how they're using universal concepts? Math doesn't lie. Chemistry is the same everywhere. They're showing us they understand how to make first contact." "That means they've done this before," Hyunwoo said. "Many times, I'd guess." Jiwon looked up at him. "Commander, I think they're part of something bigger, a confederation or alliance of species. They're not just one alien race making contact. They're representatives." The door opened and Ambassador Lee entered, flanked by 2 security officers. She was Earth's appointed representative for this historic moment, chosen by the United World Government just 3 days ago. The pressure showed on her face. "What do we know?" she asked without preamble. "They're peaceful, organized, and experienced at this," Jiwon replied. "I recommend we invite them aboard for face-to-face talks." Hyunwoo shook his head. "Too risky. We don't know what atmosphere they need, what diseases they might carry, or if they're even telling the truth about their intentions. We need to show trust," Ambassador Lee said firmly. "Humanity can't enter the galactic stage acting like frightened children. Commander, prepare a meeting room with adjustable atmosphere controls. Dr. Jiwon, work with the medical team on quarantine protocols. We're doing this." 3 hours later, a small alien shuttle docked with Sentinel-7. The airlock procedures took another hour as both sides worked to ensure safe atmospheric exchange. Finally, the inner door opened. The first alien to step through was unlike anything humans expected. It stood on 6 thin legs, its body covered in a shell that shimmered with rainbow colors. 2 large compound eyes dominated its triangular head, and delicate antennae waved in the air. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "I am Ambassador Thalvex of the Zyrene people," the alien said through a small device attached to its thorax. The translation was perfect, the voice pleasant and neutral. "It is my honor to make first contact with humanity." Behind Thalvex came 4 more aliens, each from a different species. One looked like a floating jellyfish, trailing tendrils that glowed softly. Another was covered in thick fur and stood on 4 muscular legs. The variety was stunning. Ambassador Lee stepped forward, forcing herself to smile naturally. "Welcome to Sentinel-7. I am Ambassador Lee, representing the people of Earth. We are honored by your visit." The aliens settled into seats specially prepared for their different body types. High Counselor Ornpath, the floating jellyfish creature, spoke next. His voice was deeper, more resonant. "We have observed your species for some time," Ornpath said. "Your radio signals reached us decades ago. We have been impressed by your rapid technological advancement. However, we must confess our surprise that you survived at all." Jiwon frowned. "Survived? I don't understand." Thalvex's antennae twitched in what might have been amusement or concern. "Your world, Earth. It is what we call a death world. High gravity, extreme weather, abundant dangerous predators, toxic plant life. Most species cannot survive such conditions. That you not only survived, but thrived and reached for the stars is remarkable. Hyunwoo felt a strange pride at those words, but also confusion. Our world is dangerous? Compared to what? The furry alien, who introduced himself as Merchant Velkaris, made a sound like laughter. My homeworld has gravity 1/3 of Earth's. Our predators are no larger than your house cats. Our weather is stable year-round. This is normal for most inhabited worlds in the Confederation. The Confederation? Ambassador Lee asked. The Confederation of Aligned Worlds, Ornpath explained. An alliance of 12 species working together for mutual prosperity and protection. We extend an invitation for humanity to join us as probationary members. The meeting continued for hours. The aliens explained the structure of galactic civilization, the trade networks that spanned hundreds of worlds, and the advanced technologies they could share. They spoke of laws and councils of peaceful dispute resolution and scientific cooperation. But as Ji-won listened, she began to notice something strange. The aliens spoke about defense and protection in careful terms. They mentioned the Vrexian, Swarm, an aggressive species that occasionally attacked border worlds, but they treated it like a natural disaster rather than an enemy to be fought. When she asked about military capabilities, Thalvex seemed uncomfortable. We maintain defense fleets, of course, but direct combat is avoided whenever possible. Most conflicts are resolved through negotiation and economic pressure. Violence is the last resort. Hyunwoo caught Ji-won's eye. He was thinking the same thing she was. These aliens, for all their advancement, seemed fragile, not just physically but in their thinking. They had built a civilization on avoiding conflict rather than preparing for it. As the meeting concluded, Ornpath extended the formal invitation. Humanity would make a valuable addition to the Confederation. We can offer technology, trade partners, and protection. In return, we ask only that you abide by our laws and contribute to the common good. Protection from what? Hyunwoo asked bluntly. The aliens exchanged glances. Finally, Thalvex answered. The galaxy can be dangerous for young species. We would help you settle suitable worlds in safe sectors, away from threats you are not yet ready to face. Ambassador Lee maintained her diplomatic smile, but inside she felt uneasy. The aliens meant well, but they were treating humanity like children who needed to be sheltered. They looked at Earth's harsh environment and saw only danger, not the strength it had created. We will take your generous offer to our government, Lee said carefully. This is not a decision one person can make. We will need time to discuss and debate. After the aliens returned to their ship, Hyunwoo, Ji-won, and Lee gathered in the commander's office. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on them all. They think we're weak, Hyunwoo said quietly. They see us as another species that needs their protection. Ji-won nodded slowly. They don't understand what surviving on a death world means. They've never had to fight for every advantage, never had to adapt or die. Their evolution was gentle. Ours was not. Ambassador Lee looked out at the alien ship, still hanging in space like a delicate flower. Then perhaps it's time we showed the galaxy what humanity really is. Not a species that needs protection, but one that can stand on its own. The three of them stood in silence, watching the stars. First contact had been made. Humanity's journey into the galaxy had begun, but neither humans nor aliens truly understood what that would mean. 6 months had changed everything. Ambassador Jae-sung stood on the bridge of the Harmony, Earth's first faster-than-light capable ship, and watched Valor Prime grow larger in the viewport. The moon was beautiful, wrapped in artificial atmosphere generators that glowed like strings of pearls around its surface. We'll be docking in 20 minutes, Captain Dayun reported from the helm. She was young for a starship captain, only 32, but she had proven herself the best pilot in Earth's rapidly expanding space force. The aliens are transmitting docking instructions now. Jae-sung nodded but said nothing. He had been a military strategist before becoming a diplomat, and old habits died hard. He observed everything, noting details that others might miss. The alien space station they were approaching was massive, but seemed to lack any obvious weapons. The ships moving around it flew in predictable patterns with no tactical variation. Engineer Tae-hyun joined him at the viewport, wiping grease from his hands. He had spent the entire journey studying every piece of alien technology they had been given. "I've been thinking," he said quietly. "Their FTL drive is elegant, efficient, and probably 3 times faster than anything we could build on our own. But it's fragile. One good hit and the whole system would collapse." "And our drive?" Jae-sung asked. "Slower, cruder, but I built in 6 redundant systems. We could lose half the ship and still limp home." Tae-hyun smiled slightly. "They designed for perfection. We designed for survival." The Harmony docked smoothly and the human delegation prepared to disembark. They wore light exosuits designed to compensate for Valor Prime's low gravity, which was only 40% of Earth's normal pull. Medical officers had warned that prolonged exposure to low gravity could damage bones and muscles, so the suits provided constant resistance to keep them strong. Ambassador Thalvex greeted them at the airlock, his rainbow shell gleaming under the station's soft lighting. "Welcome, Ambassador Jae-sung. We are honored to host Earth's first delegation to the Confederation capital." "The honor is ours," Jae-sung replied, stepping out of the airlock with careful movements. Even with the exosuit, the low gravity felt strange. Each step threatened to send him floating upward. Thalvex's antennae twitched. "Your suits are wise. Many species struggle with environmental adaptation. Please follow me to the council chambers." As they walked through the station, Jae-sung observed everything. The corridors were wide and well lit, decorated with art from dozens of different cultures. Aliens of various species moved about their business, and many stopped to stare at the humans. Some seemed curious, others appeared nervous. One alien, a small reptilian creature, actually backed away in apparent fear. Its companion, a being made of what looked like living crystal, had to calm it down. "Your reputation precedes you," Thalvex said apologetically. "Word has spread about your world's nature. Some find the idea of Deathworld inhabitants disturbing." "We can't help where we evolved," Captain Dayun said, her tone sharper than diplomacy required. "Of course not, and many of us find your resilience admirable." Thalvex led them into a vast chamber where hundreds of aliens gathered. The noise was overwhelming, a mix of voices, translators, and sounds that had no human equivalent. High Counselor Ornpath floated at the center, his tendrils glowing in welcome. "Humanity's delegation, please take your places. Today we formally extend membership in the Confederation of Aligned Worlds." The ceremony was long and filled with speeches from various species representatives. Each one welcomed humanity and spoke of cooperation and prosperity. But Jae-sung noticed something interesting. None of them asked what humanity could contribute. They all spoke of what the Confederation would provide. During a break in the proceedings, Merchant Velkaris approached the human delegation. The furry alien had a calculating look in his multiple eyes. "Ambassador, I represent the Quilorian Trade Guild. We would like to discuss exclusive trading rights with Earth." "Exclusive?" Jae-sung raised an eyebrow. "That seems premature. We're still learning about galactic commerce." "Precisely why you need experienced partners," Velkaris said smoothly. "We could handle all of Earth's exports and imports, saving you the complexity of dealing with dozens of different species and trade laws. For a modest percentage, of course." Tae-hyun leaned close to Jae-sung and whispered, "He's trying to box us in before we understand the market. Classic monopoly tactic." Jae-sung smiled politely at Velkaris. "We appreciate the offer, but Earth prefers to maintain trading relationships with multiple partners. Diversity of markets serves everyone's interests." Velkaris's fur rippled in what might have been disappointment, but he nodded gracefully. "As you wish. The offer remains open should you change your mind." After the ceremony concluded, General Cross invited the human delegation to tour the Confederation Defense Fleet headquarters. Cross was a member of the Thorian species, tall and armored with thick plates covering his body. He looked more intimidating than most aliens they had encountered. "Our fleet protects over 200 worlds," Cross explained as they walked through the command center. Massive displays showed ship positions throughout Confederation space. "We maintain a defensive perimeter against the Vrexian swarm and respond to natural disasters or accidents." Captain Dayun studied the displays carefully. "What's your typical response time to an emergency?" "We can have ships at any Confederation world within 48 hours, Cross said proudly. 48 hours? Dayun couldn't hide her shock. That's nearly 2 days. What happens in the meantime? Cross seemed confused by the question. The local population shelters in place. Proper emergency protocols minimize casualties to acceptable levels. Jae-sung exchanged glances with his team. The aliens' idea of defense was so different from humanity's that it was hard to believe they were discussing the same concept. May I ask about your military tactics? Jae-sung said carefully. How do you engage the Vrexian swarm? Engage? We don't engage them directly if it can be avoided. Cross brought up tactical displays. We use long-range weapons to discourage approach, then fall back to reinforced positions. Direct combat is inefficient and leads to unnecessary casualties. Tae-hyun spoke up. What if you can't fall back? What if there are civilians who can't evacuate in time? Cross's expression was hard to read, but his tone suggested he found the question strange. Then we document the tragedy and ensure proper compensation for the survivors' families. War is horrible. We minimize our exposure to it. Captain Da-yun looked like she wanted to say something harsh, but Jae-sung touched her arm gently. This wasn't the time or place. That evening, the human delegation gathered in their assigned quarters. The rooms were comfortable but felt oddly fragile, with walls made of materials that seemed decorative rather than protective. They're not warriors, Da-eun said flatly. They barely understand the concept of combat. They treat war like a natural disaster, something to avoid rather than win. Can you blame them? Tae-hyun asked. Most of them evolved on worlds where survival was easy. They never had to fight for resources or defend against predators. Cooperation worked better than competition. Jae-sung poured himself water from a container that seemed designed for low gravity. The question is, what does that mean for us? They want to assign us to a remote sector, away from the Vrexian threat. They're trying to protect us. Because they think we're like them, Da-eun said. Weak, unable to defend ourselves. We need to change that perception, Jae-sung said firmly. But carefully. If we come across as aggressive, they'll fear us. If we appear too confident, they'll think we're naive. We need to show them what humanity is capable of without threatening them. A message chime interrupted their discussion. Tae-hyun checked the console. It's from the Confederation Council. They've finalized humanity's assignment. We're being given 3 worlds in Sector 7, far from major trade routes and the Vrexian border. Captain Da-yun laughed without humor. They're putting us in a corner where we can't cause trouble or get hurt. Like children sent to their room. Then we'll make the best of it, Jae-sung said. We'll develop those worlds, build our infrastructure, and prove our worth. When the time comes, and trust me it will come, they'll see what Deathworld survivors can really do. Over the following weeks, the human delegation toured various Confederation facilities and met with representatives from all member species. Everywhere they went, they encountered the same pattern. The aliens were kind, helpful, and surprisingly naive about conflict. They had built a civilization on cooperation and mutual benefit, which was admirable. But they had also created a system that avoided hard choices and difficult battles. On their last day at Valor Prime, Thalvex hosted a farewell dinner. The food was carefully prepared to be safe for human consumption, and the conversation was pleasant. But as the evening ended, Thalvex spoke quietly to Jae-sung. I hope you don't think less of us, the alien said. I know your species has a different history, more violent perhaps. But we have built something good here. Peace and prosperity for billions of beings. Jae-sung chose his words carefully. What you've built is remarkable. But peace maintained by avoiding challenges is fragile. Sometimes the only way to protect what you value is to stand and fight. Thalvex's antennae drooped slightly, perhaps, but I hope that day never comes. Admiral Dong-hyun watched the tactical display with growing concern. The red markers representing Vrexian swarm ships were spreading across the screen like blood in water. 3 Confederation worlds had gone dark in the past week, their communications cut off, their populations presumably destroyed or captured. The swarm was moving faster than anyone had predicted. Sir, we're receiving the evacuation order, Commander Park reported from the communications station. Confederation Defense Fleet is pulling back to establish defensive lines. We're ordered to retreat to Sector 7 immediately. Dong-hyun clenched his jaw. He had been in Earth's military for 30 years, rising from a basic infantry soldier to Admiral of Humanity's Space Force. In all that time, he had never abandoned civilians to an enemy. The idea went against everything he believed in. What's the status of Colony Theta? He asked. 4 million inhabitants, mostly Quilorian and Zyrene families, Lieutenant Park replied. Confederation transports are evacuating key personnel now. But there's not enough time to get everyone out. Key personnel, Dong-hyun repeated bitterly. They're leaving the civilians behind. On the observation deck, Dr. Soon-hee was studying the biological data on the Vrexian swarm that Confederation scientists had shared. The more she learned, the more disturbed she became. The swarm operated as a hive mind, millions of individuals working in perfect coordination. Their ships were grown rather than built, organic vessels that could repair themselves and adapt to threats. But there was something the Confederation scientists had missed. Soon-hee had spent years studying Earth's social insects, ants and bees and termites. She understood hive behavior in ways the aliens didn't. The Vrexians weren't just coordinated. They were predictable. Their tactics followed patterns that made sense for a collective intelligence, but were inflexible once committed. She rushed to the bridge. "Admiral, I need to speak with you urgently." Dong-hyun turned from the tactical display. "Doctor, unless you have a way to stop the swarm, it will have to wait. We're under orders to retreat." "That's exactly what I want to talk about," Soon-hee said firmly. "We shouldn't retreat. We should attack." The entire bridge crew turned to stare at her. Commander Park looked shocked. Even Lieutenant Park, usually unflappable, seemed surprised. "Attack?" Dong-hyun said slowly. "The Confederation fleet is 10 times our size and they're retreating. What makes you think we can succeed where they failed?" Soon-hee pulled up her research on a display screen. "The Vrexians are a hive mind. That's their strength and their weakness. They're incredibly efficient against predictable enemies, but they struggle with chaos and unpredictability. The Confederation fights in formations, following established tactical doctrine. The swarm has learned to counter those tactics. But humans fight differently," Dong-hyun said, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Exactly. We improvise. We take risks. We do things that don't make tactical sense but work anyway. The swarm won't know how to respond." Dong-hyun looked at the tactical display at the red markers spreading across Colony Theta's system. He thought about 4 million civilians waiting to die. He thought about the orders telling him to retreat. Then he thought about what it meant to be human. "Commander Park, get me Colonel Haewon," he ordered, "and plot a course to Colony Theta, maximum speed." "Sir, the orders," Lieutenant Park began. "I heard the orders," Dong-hyun interrupted, "and I'm disobeying them. Anyone who wants to file a complaint can do so after we've saved those civilians. Now move." The Earth fleet consisted of 12 warships, a mix of destroyers, cruisers, and the flagship carrier Indomitable. They were outnumbered by the Vrexian forces at Colony Theta by nearly 5-1. By any reasonable analysis, they were going to their deaths, but Admiral Dong-hyun had learned something important during humanity's first year in the Confederation. Reasonable analysis didn't account for the unreasonable determination of a species that had fought for every scrap of survival in Earth's harsh environment. Colonel Haewon assembled her ground forces in the Indomitable's hangar bay. 5,000 soldiers in powered armor, carrying weapons that the Confederation considered primitive but effective. She looked at their faces, saw the mixture of fear and resolve, and felt proud. "The Vrexians are expecting us to run," she told them. "Every other species does. They're counting on fear and sensible tactics, so we're going to do something stupid instead. We're going to charge right down their throats and make them regret every step they took toward this colony." The soldiers shouted their approval. Haewon had trained them hard over the past year, preparing for a war that everyone said would never come. Now that it was here, they were ready. The Earth fleet dropped out of FTL space at the edge of Colony Theta's system. Immediately, Vrexian ships began moving to intercept them. The organic vessels looked like massive insects, all chitin plates and clicking mandibles. They moved in perfect formation, coordinated by the hive mind. "Fighter squadrons launch," Dong-hyun ordered calmly. "Execute attack pattern Delta 9. Delta 9 wasn't a real attack pattern. It was a deliberately chaotic assault designed to confuse enemy tracking systems. Human pilots flew in seemingly random directions, breaking formation, regrouping, then splitting apart again. To anyone watching, it looked like panic and disorder. Pilot Minji led the first squadron, her fighter weaving between Vrexian vessels at speeds that made her vision blur. She fired missiles at one ship, then immediately dove toward another, pulling up at the last second in a maneuver that would have killed most alien pilots through sheer G-force. "This is insane," her wingman called over the radio. "I love it." The Vrexian ships tried to coordinate a response, but their hive mind kept recalculating probabilities. The human fighters weren't following any known tactical doctrine. They took risks that no sane pilot would take, survived through reflexes and pure determination. One fighter screamed toward a Vrexian cruiser, weapons blazing. The swarm ship's defenses focused on it, assuming it was a suicide run. At the last possible moment, the pilot ejected, and the fighter's computer rammed the cruiser's command section on autopilot. The cruiser's coordination systems went down and 3 nearby vessels lost synchronization. "Beautiful," Minji said, watching the effect ripple through the enemy formation. "Keep them guessing. Don't let them predict us." The main fleet engaged shortly after. Donghyun watched the battle unfold on his screens, making decisions in seconds that would have taken Confederation commanders hours of analysis. When a Vrexian battleship moved to flank them, he ordered the cruiser Defiant to ram its propulsion systems directly. "Sir, that will destroy the Defiant," Commander Park said urgently. "Not if they eject the crew pods first," Donghyun replied. "Do it!" The Defiant's crew evacuated, then the ship accelerated on automatic pilot, crashing into the Vrexian battleship with devastating force. Both vessels were crippled, but the Defiant's sacrifice opened a hole in the enemy formation. "All ships, through the gap. Get to the colony." On the ground, Haewon's forces were already landing. The Vrexians had ground troops surrounding the colony, preparing for the final assault. They were expecting the standard Confederation response, which would have been defensive positions and holding actions. Instead, Haewon led a direct charge into their lines. The Vrexian warriors were formidable, with armored carapaces and vicious claws, but they fought as a collective, each individual part of a greater whole. Human soldiers fought as individuals who supported each other, unpredictable and fierce. Haewon personally led the assault on a Vrexian command cluster, her powered armor taking hits that would have killed an unarmored soldier. She fought with a combination of military training and raw aggression, pushing forward when doctrine said to fall back. "Use their coordination against them," she shouted to her troops. "Hit one and the others will respond predictably. Then hit them from another angle." Dr. Soon-hee watched from orbit, analyzing the battle data. Her theory was proving correct. The Vrexians were struggling against human unpredictability. Every time they adapted to one tactic, the humans switched to something different. It was chaos, brutal and costly, but it was working. The battle raged for 18 hours. The human fleet lost 5 ships and ground forces took 40% casualties, but they held the line. They protected the colony, and when Vrexian reinforcements arrived and saw the carnage, something unprecedented happened. The swarm retreated. In the aftermath, Admiral Donghyun stood on the bridge of the battered Indomitable, looking at the damage reports. So many dead, so many injured. But 4 million civilians were alive because humanity had refused to abandon them. "Admiral, we're receiving transmissions from all over the Confederation," Commander Park said quietly. "News of what happened here is spreading. Some are calling us heroes. Others are calling us reckless. Let them call us whatever they want," Donghyun said tiredly. "We did what was right." Colonel Haewon joined him on the bridge, her armor scorched and damaged. "The civilians are safe. Confederation relief ships are arriving now. They're asking how we held against such odds." Donghyun smiled grimly. "Tell them the truth. We're from a death world. We don't know how to give up." Across the galaxy, the Confederation Council convened an emergency session. The humans had violated direct orders, engaged in combat. Historian Boram had always loved archives. The smell of old data crystals, the careful organization of information spanning millions of years, the stories waiting to be discovered. When Earth joined the Confederation, she had immediately requested access to the galactic archives on Valor Prime. It had taken 8 months to get proper clearance, but finally she stood in the great repository of knowledge, surrounded by more information than existed in all of Earth's libraries combined. The Archivist Prime, a being called Delnthar, hovered nearby. He was ancient, his robotic body maintained for over 10,000 years to preserve his knowledge and purpose. His optical sensors glowed with patient curiosity as he watched the human woman explore the archive's main chamber. "You are the first human to visit us," Delnthar said, his voice synthesized but somehow warm. "What knowledge do you seek?" Boram looked up from the catalog she was browsing. "Everything. But I suppose that's not practical. I'm particularly interested in the history of first contacts, how species were discovered, how they integrated into the Confederation. A vast subject. May I suggest starting with the Confederation's founding?" Over the following weeks, Boram immersed herself in galactic history. She learned about the 12 founding species who had created the Confederation 3,000 years ago. She read about wars that had been fought and peace treaties that had ended them. She discovered trade agreements and cultural exchanges, scientific breakthroughs and diplomatic failures. But something kept bothering her. Every species in the Confederation had remarkably similar evolutionary paths. They all came from worlds with stable climates, abundant resources, and relatively few natural threats. Even the most dangerous alien homeworld was paradise compared to Earth. Delnthar, she asked one day, is there any record of species from harsher worlds? Anything like Earth? The ancient robot's lights flickered in a pattern that might have been consideration. There are some references in the restricted archives. Information classified by ancient Confederation protocols. Restricted? Why would evolutionary data be restricted? I do not know. Those archives were sealed before my activation. Only High Council members can access them. Delnthar paused. However, I sense your curiosity is pure. If you request official permission, I will support your application. The request took weeks to process. The Confederation Council was still debating what to do about humanity's actions at Colony Theta. And Boram's request got caught up in the political turmoil. Finally, Ambassador Jae-sung intervened personally, arguing that understanding humanity's origins was essential for proper integration. Permission was granted with conditions. Boram could access the restricted archives, but a council member had to be present. High Counselor Ornpath himself agreed to supervise. The restricted archives were in a deeper section of the facility, protected by multiple security systems. When Boram entered with Ornpath and Delnthar, she felt a strange sense of anticipation. Whatever was hidden here had been kept secret for a very long time. The archives you requested, Delnthar said, activating ancient data crystals. Records of the Precursor Evaluation Project. Precursors? Boram asked. Who were they? The species who came before, Ornpath explained, his tendrils glowing dimly. Millions of years ago, they seeded life across the galaxy. We owe our existence to them. The data began to display, and Boram read with growing amazement. The precursors had been incredibly advanced, capable of manipulating genetics and terraforming entire worlds. They had created 2 types of planets for their seeding project. The first type were called safe worlds. These planets had everything a developing species would need: stable climates, abundant food, minimal natural disasters, and few dangerous predators. The precursors designed them to nurture intelligent life gently, allowing civilizations to develop through cooperation rather than competition. The second type were called crucible worlds. These planets were deliberately harsh, designed to forge species through constant challenge and adaptation. High gravity, extreme weather, abundant predators, toxic plants, and limited resources. Everything about these worlds demanded strength, intelligence, and resilience. I don't understand, Boram said, her hands trembling as she read. Why create both types? What was the purpose? Delnthar's ancient voice held a note of sadness. The precursors believed in balance. Safe world species would develop wisdom, culture, and cooperation. Crucible world species would develop strength, adaptability, and combat capability. Together, they would create a complete galactic civilization. How many crucible worlds were created? Boram asked, though she already suspected the answer. 57, Delnthar replied. Of those, 43 were total failures. Life never developed beyond primitive organisms. 11 developed complex life but never achieved intelligence. 2 developed intelligent species, but they destroyed themselves before reaching space. Boram's voice was barely a whisper. And the last one? Earth, Ornpath said quietly. Your world is the only crucible world that successfully produced a spacefaring civilization. You are the only species to survive the crucible and reach for the stars. The silence in the archive was profound. Boram sat down slowly, her mind racing through the implications. Everything about humanity suddenly made sense. Their physical strength compared to other species, their pain tolerance, their endurance, their aggressive problem-solving and risk-taking behavior, even their tendency to form pack bonds with other species. We were designed, she said slowly, engineered to be warriors. Not designed, Delnthar corrected gently. Challenged. The precursors did not manipulate your genetics directly. They created the environment and let natural selection do the work. What you became through your own struggle and adaptation. Ornpath floated closer, his tendrils reaching out in a gesture that might have been sympathy. Now you understand why we treat your species with such caution. You are the result of millions of years of evolution in the harshest environment imaginable. You are what the precursors intended to create but rarely succeeded in producing. Boram looked at the data again, her historian's mind cataloging every detail. The restricted archives. You kept this secret. Why? Fear, Ornpath admitted. The Confederation's founders discovered this information 2,000 years ago. They realized that if a crucible species ever arose, it would be vastly more capable of violence than any safe world species. They decided to classify the information and hoped such a species would never appear. But we did appear, Boram said, and you tried to protect us, to shelter us in a safe sector away from danger. We meant well, Ornpath said defensively. We thought you needed our protection. That exposure to galactic threats too early would destroy you. You were wrong, a new voice said from the archive entrance. Admiral Dong Hyun stood there, flanked by Ambassador Jae Sung. They had been summoned after Boram's discovery was reported to the council. Dong Hyun walked forward, his military bearing evident even in the low gravity. You weren't trying to protect us. You were trying to protect yourselves from us. You were afraid of what we might become. Can you blame us? Ornpath asked. Colony Theta proved our fears justified. You charged into battle when all others retreated. You sacrificed thousands to save millions. You fought with a ferocity we cannot comprehend. We fought to protect the innocent, Jae Sung said firmly. The precursors may have designed Earth to create warriors, but they didn't design our choices. We chose to defend those civilians. We chose to stand when we could have run. Boram pulled up more data from the restricted archives. There's more here. Precursor notes on the intended purpose of crucible species. They weren't meant to conquer safe world civilizations. They were meant to protect them. Delnthar's lights pulsed in confirmation. Correct. The precursors understood that peaceful civilizations are vulnerable to aggressive forces. They created crucible worlds hoping to produce species that could serve as guardians, warriors who would protect rather than conquer. But only one crucible species succeeded, Boram continued, which means the precursors' plan was incomplete. The Confederation developed without its intended protectors. You built your civilization around avoiding conflict because you never had anyone to defend you properly. The implications hung in the air like a weight. The Confederation had existed for thousands of years, always retreating from major threats, always prioritizing preservation over confrontation. They had built something beautiful but fragile. The Vrexian swarm, Dong Hyun said slowly. How long have they been a threat? 200 years, Ornpath admitted. They appear, attack border worlds, then retreat. We've lost dozens of colonies to them, millions of lives. And you just accepted it? You never seriously tried to stop them? How could we? Direct military confrontation would cost too many lives. Our species aren't built for sustained combat. Jae Sung stepped forward. But humanity is. That's what you're realizing now. That's why you brought us here, to see this information. Ornpath's tendrils drooped in what might have been shame or resignation. The council is divided. Some want to restrict your expansion, to keep you contained where you can't threaten us. Others believe you are what the precursors intended, the guardians we never had. And what do you believe? Boram asked the ancient counselor. 2 years had transformed the Confederation in ways no one could have predicted. Fleet Admiral Dong Hyun stood on the bridge of the massive battle carrier Indomitable, watching hundreds of ships assemble in formation. Human vessels formed the core of the fleet, but now they were joined by alien ships that had been upgraded with hybrid technology. The Confederation had learned to fight. Final fleet count, sir, Commander Park reported. 847 vessels, including auxiliary craft, personnel from 14 different species, all awaiting your orders. Dong Hyun nodded slowly. Leading a multi-species fleet had seemed impossible 2 years ago. Now it was reality. The transformation hadn't been easy. Teaching aliens who had evolved on gentle worlds to think like warriors required patience and new approaches. But General Haewon had proven it could be done. On the ground training facility of New Seoul, humanity's largest colony world, Haewon watched her mixed-species troops run through combat drills. Serene soldiers moved alongside human marines, their rainbow shells painted with unit insignia. Quilorian warriors practiced flanking maneuvers with Thorian heavy infantry. It was chaotic and beautiful. Squad 7, tighten that formation, she called out. Remember, you're protecting each other. Watch your partner's weakness and cover it. A young Zyrene soldier named Thalvin approached her after the drill. His antennae drooped with exhaustion, but his eyes held determination. General, I must ask, how do humans push through fear? During combat simulations, I feel the urge to flee, but I see human soldiers advance even when injured. Hay-1 considered the question carefully. Fear is natural. We feel it too. But we learned long ago that running doesn't always save you. Sometimes the only way to survive is to go forward. We fight through fear because giving up means death. Your world taught you this, Thalvin said. It wasn't a question. Yes, but you're learning it too. You stood your ground in that last drill when 6 months ago you would have retreated. You're becoming something your species has never been before. Back on the Indomitable, Engineer Tae-hyun was making final adjustments to the fleet's new weapon systems. He had spent 2 years combining human engineering principles with alien technology, creating something neither could have built alone. The results were impressive and slightly terrifying. These new shield harmonics are incredible, his assistant, a crystalline being named Shellcore, said enthusiastically. The efficiency is 40% higher than standard Confederation systems. Because we built in redundancy, Tae-hyun explained. Alien shields are optimized for maximum efficiency, but they fail catastrophically when overloaded. Our version sacrifices some efficiency for survivability. If one system fails, others compensate. The human way, Shellcore said. I'm beginning to understand the wisdom in it. In the command center, Dr. Ji-won and Dr. Soon-hee were reviewing the latest intelligence on the Rexian swarm. The enemy was gathering for something big, intelligence suggested. Scouts reported massive hive ships assembling at the edge of Confederation space, more than had ever been seen in one place. They're coming for Valor Prime, Soon-hee said with certainty. They know it's the Confederation capital. They want to break our spirit. Can we stop them? Ji-won asked. We have to. If Valor Prime falls, the Confederation collapses. Soon-hee pulled up biological analysis of Rexian command structures. But I think I've found something. The Hive Emperor, Vrexnal. He's the central node of their entire coordination network. If we can reach him, disrupt his control, the whole swarm becomes confused. That's a suicide mission, Ji-won said flatly. Yes, but humans specialize in those, don't they? Ambassador Yoon Seo had arrived on Valor Prime 3 days earlier for what she thought would be routine diplomatic meetings. Instead, she found herself coordinating the evacuation of billions of civilians from dozens of worlds. The Vrexian assault was spreading faster than anyone predicted, and this time they weren't retreating. They know we're stronger now, High Counselor Ornpath said, his tendrils dim with worry. They're trying to overwhelm us before we can fully mobilize. Then we need to hit them hard and fast, Yoon Seo replied. She had learned much from Ambassador Jae-sung, who had retired the previous year. We can't fight defensively. We need to take the battle to them. You want to attack the Hive Emperor directly, Ornpath said. That's Admiral Dong-hyun's plan, isn't it? It's risky, but it's the kind of risk that wins wars. The Vrexian fleet arrived at Valor Prime system 2 days later. Their ships blotted, out the stars, organic vessels pulsing with alien life. The Hive Emperor's command ship was massive, easily 10 times larger than any other vessel in the system. It hung in space like a cancerous growth, coordinating the assault. Admiral Dong-hyun watched the enemy fleet approach and felt a strange calm. This was the moment everything had been building toward. 2 years of training, preparation, and transformation. Humanity and the Confederation standing together against an enemy that had terrorized them for centuries. All ships, this is Admiral Dong-hyun, he said over the fleet-wide channel. Today we fight not just for Valor Prime, but for every world in the Confederation. We fight for our families, our friends, and for species we've never met. We fight because it's right. All vessels, engage at will. The battle began as 1,000 ships clashed in the darkness of space. Human vessels led aggressive assaults, breaking through Vrexian formations with tactics the swarm had never encountered. But this time, Alien ships followed them, supporting the attacks with coordinated fire. Captain Da-Yun commanded the fast attack wing, her ship the Harmony dancing between enemy vessels. All fighters, pattern Omega. Let's show them what we learned. The fighter squadrons executed maneuvers that combined human aggression with alien precision. Pilot Minji led her squadron in a spiraling attack that confused Vrexian tracking systems, while Zyrene pilots provided covering fire with perfectly calculated shots. It was chaos and order combined, beautiful and deadly. On the ground, General Heiwan was already fighting. Vrexian drop pods had landed on Valor Prime itself, and she led the defense personally. Her mixed-species troops fought with a ferocity that amazed her. The Zyrene soldiers who had been so afraid 2 years ago now held their positions under heavy fire. Quilorian warriors charged Vrexian warriors with battle cries that sounded almost human. This is what we've become, Heiwan said to herself, firing her weapon at an advancing Vrexian. Guardians, all of us. In space, Admiral Dong Hyun made the critical decision. Captain Da-Yun, Admiral's priority override. Take a strike force and punch through to the Hive Emperor's ship. Dr. Soon-hee has identified the target. End this. Da-Yun understood immediately. Sir, that's a one-way trip. I know, but it's the only way to save billions of lives. I'm not ordering this. I'm asking for volunteers. The response was immediate. Over 200 ships, human and alien alike, volunteered for the suicide mission. They formed up around the Harmony and began their assault toward the center of the Vrexian fleet. The fighting was brutal. Ships were destroyed by the dozens as they pushed forward, but for every vessel lost, others pressed on. The Confederation forces had learned humanity's most important lesson. Sometimes survival requires sacrifice. Da-Yun's ship took hit after hit, systems failing, hull breaches spreading. But she kept flying, kept fighting. Beside her, an Zyrene cruiser captain named Velthas stayed in formation even as his ship burned. For the Confederation, Velthas said over the comm. For humanity, who taught us to be brave. For everyone, Da-Un replied. They reached the Hive Emperor's ship. Da-Un armed every weapon remaining on the Harmony and accelerated to ramming speed. Around her, dozens of other ships did the same. The Hive Emperor, Vrexnall, felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. The impacts were catastrophic. The Hive Emperor's ship broke apart, and with it, the coordination network collapsed. Across 3 star systems, millions of Vrexian warriors suddenly found themselves without direction, without purpose. Dr. Soon-hee immediately broadcast the message she and Dr. Jiwon had prepared. It was transmitted in chemical signals the swarm could understand, carried on every frequency. The message was simple. You have fought bravely. You have shown strength. Now we offer peace. Join us as equals, or leave and never return. Choose. The swarm, leaderless and confused, chose. They retreated, but they also opened communication channels. For the first time in 200 years, the Vrexians wanted to talk instead of fight. 3 weeks later, Ambassador Yoon Seo sat across from a Vrexian representative, a being that called itself Vrenthak. The peace negotiations were tense, but they were happening. Your species is unusual, Vrenthak said through its translator. The swarm has conquered many worlds. Always, species either fight to extinction or surrender completely. Humanity did neither. You fought fiercely, but you offered mercy. We learned the hard way that strength without mercy is just cruelty, Yoon Seo replied. Our world taught us to be strong, but we chose to be kind as well. Back on Earth, Admiral Dong Hyun stood in front of the memorial wall. Thousands of names were carved there, human and alien alike. Captain Da-Yun's name was near the top. He touched it gently, feeling the weight of command and sacrifice. Historian Boram joined him carrying a data pad. I've been going through more precursor records,